flooded in. Our correspondent Jeremy Vine has been looking into the complaints. He found that black entrepreneurs who've done well look over their shoulder at the plight of others and see looming disaster.
No doubt about it, black South Africans are finally moving closer to the streets where the money is. Louis CHO is 33 and he runs an advertising agency which has created jobs for half a dozen black people. He's perfectly at home here in Sandton, an affluent business district still dominated by whites.
All right.
But today, Louis is going back to his real home, which is 2 miles and a world away, the Alexandra township. Louis's life is packed with almost unbearable contrasts. Alex is where he was brought up, and even though he doesn't live here now, it's where his heart still is, and his mother too.
So got it 10th October, November, December.
No wonder Nelson Mandela's government adores people like Louis. He's an embodiment of the beloved phrase, black economic empowerment. But unfortunately, similar success stories are very thin on the ground here, as Louis told me when he took me on a tour. So Louis, how does it feel when you come back here, anyway?
Jeremy, it's a lot of mixed feelings, you know. Every time you come here, it's a very depressing, you know, environment.
Because everybody, almost everybody's where they were last time you were here.
There's no move at all. I think it's very sad, actually. You know,
we head for the place where he says everyone catches up with the latest news. The township car wash.
Now,
this is the place to be.
This is Alex. This is the real Alex. This is a car wash, as you can see. And I have my friends here, you know, a lot of them live around here. Hey, guys, how's it?
These are Louis' oldest friends, but it's almost as if they're living in a different country.
Guys, is life improving? I think that's the $1 million question.
My problem is one year in this country. You see, Alexandra is a little location, so lack of houses and too many shacks here, and the crime is going up and up every day.
And are you working?
No, at the moment I'm not working. That's why I say, you know, going out to look for a job, it's a difficult thing nowadays. You can't find a job anywhere.
I mean, what happens if you go to the banks? I mean, are the banks helpful? I mean,
when you go to someone and ask for help, then he tells you, sorry, my friend, I can't help you. Yeah. There's a door.
And of which you've got friends, you've got ideas,
yes,
you've got future.
But is there a future? The gap between rich and poor black South Africans is actually widening. And members of the new black elite are more and more concerned. This businessman wrote a book on black empowerment, criticizing it.
There have been successes for a very, very small selection of black people. So from their perspective, probably it's been a success, you know, because, I mean, they've seen their bank balances, you know, basically, you know, growing spectacularly large. But then from a perspective of an average black South African citizen, I think it's been a disaster.
Because actually, your average black person is getting poorer.
Yes, they have. I think that the point is there are more unemployed black people today, for instance, than there's ever been, you know, before.
Given what went on in South Africa's past, it is very difficult to argue against the principle of black empowerment. A succession of administrations whose members came from the 15% white minority were at pains to ensure there was no black advancement at all. The apartheid system denied black people access to jobs and education. When Nelson Mandela was dramatically released from prison in 1990, the tables started to turn at last. Mr. Mandela became president, but the man on the left of the screen, Cyril Ramaphosa, quit politics, having decided black empowerment was not necessarily something the politicians were best placed to do. These days, Mr. Ramaphosa heads a firm called NAIL, New Africa Investments Limited. It seeks to spread share ownership among the poor, and it's been very successful because big companies want to be able to say their shares are empowering black South Africans. But Nail has been controversial too. Mr. Ramaphosa has become wealthy, but some have wondered if anyone else has been helped by his company.
Through all these activities, we've been able to spread economic empowerment in terms of the ownership and control of a number of companies.
But does owning a piece of paper which goes up in value over the course of weeks empower anybody?
It creates wealth.
How does it do that?
It creates wealth in that if you own that piece of paper, you can encash it and have some money and be able to either educate your children, that is empowerment, be able to purchase a house, that is empowerment.
But you can't, the sums we're talking about with the people who are involved who need to be empowered don't have sufficient numbers of pieces of paper to cash them in and buy a house, do they?
Yeah, well, I think it goes some way to make someone feel that they have some money that they can do things with, which they would ordinarily not have had in the past.
Pinder Mahdi is not convinced.
I mean, you know, I could enter into a deal with BBC where I personally end up being a 50% shareholder and being a billionaire, and I would say that this is good for the black masses, and I would be lying. You know, it's good for me, not for the black masses. And you see, that's the problem. The problem is that a whole lot of things have been happening which are good for individuals, you know, but they use the umbrella of black empowerment to legitimize their enrichment.
I'm rather critical of those who dismiss this project, these efforts that are being made, because they do not see immediate results.
Or because you and others are getting rich through them?
Well, I mean, they may well be doing so, but in the end, we would like to lead to a point where black people, collectively, have real economic muscle in this country, and that is the real import of the Black Empowerment Project.
While those arguments go on, the vast majority of the black population here is still waiting to be empowered, waiting for the promises the ANC made in 1994 to come good. And while there is no doubt that the poverty and the shack dwellings in a place like the Alexandra Township here weigh very heavily on the government's mind, its movement is restricted because every time it tries to expand black empowerment, whites in South Africa become agitated. This treasured antique gramophone player will be packed up very soon. Increasingly alarmed at the direction South Africa is taking, Mike Steenkamp and his partner Theoline will emigrate to Canada in January. Mike has a top job in banking, and although he says he supports black empowerment on the surface, the reality, he claims, is
creating positions without meaningful mandates, meaningful responsibility for profitability, real responsibility for shareholders' returns.
How do you feel it affects you? Are you seeing the future, your career here in South Africa, as something with a definite ceiling on it?
I have a profound sense of that. You know, notwithstanding performance that far outweighs some of the tokenist appointments that have been made, one feels that you're getting monetary rewards, but the positional power is certainly not coming with it anymore.
This is sad, isn't it? Because you've said you do support black empowerment as a concept. Is there a sense in which you have maybe lost patience too early?
The sadness around it is that if one looks at Africa, one really hopes that it gets its act together and that South Africa doesn't follow the African model.
Among those who have not got the option of leaving, a deeply disturbing sense of alienation is building up. Whites in Vredendorp are poor and bitter.
I'm a qualified bricklayer. I go into a place, you go look for a job, they don't want to give, I'm too white. They take a black guy, he's got no experience, he's got nothing, but he gets a job, I don't get a job. I mean, that's wrong.
I think Mandela must think of us whites as well, not just think of the blacks first. Because there are a lot of whites around here who get forgotten about.
How bad are things now for you?
Bad, 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 bad.
The comments from these two white men were one thing, but the hardest words came from their Indian neighbor.
You pick up the phone now. On the other end, it's a black answering. And you know, you can't get what you want. And it pushes up your phone bill.
And you feel it's what did you say, Indians, coloreds and whites?
Yeah, that he's being, whooped and given the boot.
But the voices here sound increasingly off the point. The most forceful complaints about empowerment are from black people who say it's not going far enough. And it is not just the poor who are saying that. It's now the wealthy too. People like Louis, who simply cannot reconcile the destination he's arrived at with the place he came from.
If we don't find ways of addressing the present imbalances and the poverty, lack of education we have in this country, I foresee chaos, complete chaos. And it's the kind of chaos that would have to spread throughout Africa, because we've become the last beacon of hope for the other countries outside our borders.